So just sit back, relax, get a cup of tea. It's a beautiful day to be inside. We'll be joined by Todd McLeish in a few moments. Again, greetings, everyone. This is Paul Rosali from the Bartleville Land Trust. This is a chance to check your audio and check everything else. We're getting a lot of people sign up, both on the Zoom website, or the Zoom application, as well as YouTube and Facebook. Happy you're all here. And for those of you who will not be able to join us today, you'll be able to see us on YouTube. It's called The Thrill of Backyard Birds, as well as on Facebook. Greetings, everyone. We have people still signing up, which is very nice. Take your time. Get used to this, this platform. And let's see. I think we'll play a little bit of something. See what I've got. Hello, everyone. It's Paul Rosali from the Bartleville Land Trust. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll begin in about 25 minutes or so. This is just an opportunity to check your audio, make sure your audio is okay, check your video, make sure that you can see us. And we'll begin in about 20 minutes or so.
Start video, shoot content. What's going on?
We'll be joined by Todd McLeish in about 20 minutes or so. In the meanwhile, let's see if you can name all the birds that you see in this video, except for the squirrels, of course. Greetings, everyone. This is Paul Rosselli from the Burrillville Land Trust. I want to welcome you all to a continuation of our month-long celebration of Earth Day. Today we'll have natural history writer and lifelong bird watcher Todd McLeish talk about some of the backyard birds. And we've got a good crowd here today. Got about 16 people on our Zoom live stream. Got a handful or so on YouTube and about 20 or 30 on Facebook watching us as well. So sit back for now. We should begin in about 16 minutes. I'll play another video for you to watch. Again, greetings, everyone. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We'll begin in about 20 minutes, maybe a little less. My name is Paul Rosselli. I'm with the Burrillville Land Trust. This is one of our programs that we'll be putting out there for the remainder of the month. Please make sure that your microphone is on mute and your video is on mute for now. We'll be taking questions a little bit later, so hold on to your questions. And this time is just for everyone to get used to this format. If you have any thoughts or problems troubleshooting, please unmute your microphone and let me know if you're experiencing any issues. We've got 19 people who are joining us here on Zoom, so welcome everyone. We have, looks like about a little more than half a dozen on our YouTube channel. And we have about 20 joining us on Facebook. So please make sure that your microphone is set to mute. And we'll begin in a few moments. Please make sure that your microphone is on mute. And of course, once the birds are gone, they're gone. Greetings, everyone. My name is Paul Rosselli from the Burrillville Land Trust. There are about 20 people who are joining us this afternoon for what we're calling the Thrill of the Backyard Bird. Naturalist and natural history writer and avid bird watcher. Todd McLeish should be joining us in a few minutes. He's going to set up his slideshow and then we'll begin promptly at about 25, 26 past. So if you want to get up, get something to drink, get a cup of tea, now's the time to do it. I never knew they could make that that sound and while chewing on a seed. Again, for those of you who are just joining us, greetings, everyone. My name is Paul Rosselli, president of the Burrillville Land Trust. Just spending this time to get a little organized, take a deep breath, relax. We have 21 people who are joining us this morning. And I'm going to stop sharing this. Welcome our presenter, Todd McLeish. Todd? Todd is getting ready. There you go, Todd. There.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, sure can. Well, we've got a really good crowd here this morning, or this afternoon rather. We have about 20 people
Oh, good.
on the Zoom meeting. And we have about, looks like about 10 or 12 on YouTube, and still about 20 or so on Facebook. So we
All
got a
right.
good overview. If you have your slideshow, if you want to get that ready in the background.
I do. I'm trying to find myself to make sure I look pretty. Why can't I even see my own self yet?
Okay.
That helps. There we go.
And from the way things look, looks like folks are from all over the state. Cranston, South County, Providence, locally here in Burrillville, and
All right.
a few from North Smithfield, so all over the state.
Terrific. So I've got my slides in the background ready to go.
Great,
Can I just test them for a minute? Can I share?
you sure can. Yeah, go right ahead.
Um,
There you go. That
is
looks
that
good.
working?
So far, so good. And if you hit the little, let's see, the little screen, there it is. Perfect.
Is it working?
It works really well.
All right.
And for those of you who are watching this, and if you can just leave it up there just for a second, Todd, on the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a bunch of boxes. It'll say speakers view full screen. If you enter full screen and then go to speakers view, then you'll just see Todd and his slideshows. If you have any other configuration, you'll see a picture of me, or you'll see all of the other folks that are here as well. So just a little big piece of advice to enhance your viewing experience. I think we've got a few other people who are showing up. So Todd, if you can, actually you can leave it there. That's fine.
I can take it off if you like. That's easy enough.
Yep, I'm going to share my screen in about 2 minutes
All right. Let me stop.
and do my thing.
And Paul, is my audio going okay? I was curious as to whether a headset microphone might be clearer.
That's up to you. Want to try it? It's pretty clear now, but why don't you try it and let's see
Let me
what
give it a try just for experiment's sake.
Do you hear me better this way?
Oh, that's a much cleaner signal. So sure, why don't we do that?
Let's do that. That's what I thought might be the case.
I've discovered with headsets though, there's what's called compression in the headset as well as in the system. So there's compression here and then there's compression here. So every once in a while it cuts out because your voice is loud at certain points. And so both of those compressions kick in and you lose it entirely. So I
Would you
may
prefer that I not
ask to
use
just take it off,
Okay.
but we'll see.
Say the word if you want to do that.
Okay, great. And again, I want to welcome everybody. Looks like we've got a few other people who've joined us this morning or this afternoon. I keep on saying this morning. We have 20 people who are here this morning. And I can't see YouTube right now, but I'm guessing it's probably still about 6 or 8. And then on Facebook, last time I checked, there was about 20. So good crowd, good group. Thank you all for attending. A strange weather pattern a little while ago. On that side of the house, it was pouring rain. On that side of the house, bright blue skies, bright sunshine. Pretty amazing. So what I'll do, Todd, is I'll do my little introductory slideshow. We never talked about Q&A, but if there's time, would you take a few questions?
Of course, absolutely.
I'll invite people to post their questions on the chat box. And then that way, if there are common questions or similar questions, I'll ask them. Boy. Yeah. I need someone to drop by and give me a haircut. That's the only way it's going to happen. And it's 25 past. We'll give it 2 more minutes. What I'm seeing on the list of folks who are here, my guess is that there may be other people who are watching the presentation along with the individual who signed in. So we may easily have 30 plus people who are
Terrific.
watching. Yeah.
Terrific. I just posted a link on my Facebook page, so hopefully some of my friends will be joining us as well.
Great. Perfect. I have to make sure my slideshow is up and running in the background somewhere. There it is. Let me get out of it. There we go. I want to welcome everybody. My name is Paul Rosselli from the Burrillville Land Trust. Thank you so much for joining us today. The Burrillville Land Trust is a private nonprofit land trust. I'll tell you a little bit more about the land trust in a few minutes, but I want to welcome you all to a month-long celebration of Earth Day. This is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And the Burrillville Land Trust has been holding or hosting a bunch of events and presentations all during this month. So welcome, sit back, get a cup of ginger tea or green tea, although green tea might be a little bit too much this late in the afternoon, or early in the afternoon. We'll give it a go in just about 1 minute from now. And again, for those of you who are just joining us, my name is Paul Rosali from the Burrillville Land Trust. I want to welcome you all. The Burrillville Land Trust is a private, nonprofit land trust in the town of Burrillville. We are a 501c3, all volunteer public charity within the town. Being a public charity, we accept donations, both in cash form and pieces of land, and have over the years been able to accept both. You can find out more information about us on our website, which is the burrillvillelandtrust.org. The mission of the Land Trust is to preserve and protect the rural character of the town of Burrillville through education, acquisition, and advocacy. Many of our board members are from our town as well as outside. And we partner with a lot of organizations all throughout Rhode Island. Currently, we own 218 acres of land. Every fourth Wednesday of the month, God willing, and once this coronavirus is finished, perhaps next year, join us again for every fourth Wednesday, something we're calling Green Drinks that happens at Bravo Brewery in Pascoag, Rhode Island. So why are you here? I can tell you a little bit about why I'm here. It's because of this sense of place, this sense of community, that even within our streams and rivers, places we visit all the time, we get that feeling of belonging. And getting that feeling of belonging is very important to all of us, because every time we see a stone wall or see a fallen tree and look at the rings of the tree, we can get some idea of what's happened before us, how trees have survived all of these years. And every time we take a step in the woods, there are new discoveries to be made. Seems like every pond, river, and stream has something unique in it that is just unique to that particular place. The ground in which we walk on, the stones and places that we visit have life in them, and life surrounds them. Even now, with all the rain that we've been getting, vernal pools have filled up, and in those vernal pools, there's life. And that sense of place, because of that life, is why we're here. So I want to welcome you all to this presentation with Todd McLeish, titled "The Thrill of the Backyard Birds." Todd is a natural history writer and lifelong bird watcher. Today he's going to shed some light on some backyard friends, particularly in parks in southern New England. So please welcome warmly Todd McLeish. Todd's going to begin his presentation, and as soon as he presents it, I'll give you some idea of how to view it in probably a better way. So Todd, the floor is yours.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Paul. Glad to be here. Glad we've got a good sized audience out there to listen and learn a little bit about some of the birds here in our backyards here in southern New England. I've been a birder for 35 years or so. I caught the birding bug when I was in college, and it has really sort of launched me into a real variety of other activities. It was launched me into the career that I have now as a science writer and nature writer, and author of books about wildlife and endangered species. And so for me, birds has really been a great entryway into learning about nature and the environment and all the things that are affecting those birds and other creatures. And in part, it's an easy animal to get excited about, to want to learn about, in part because they're there. They're easy to find and easy to see. It's not like if you wanted to be one who was interested in reptiles, and it would be difficult to go out and try to find very many of them in a given day. Here in Rhode Island, you just have to look out your back window or out your window as you're driving, or anywhere you look. For the most part, you're going to see birds, and lots of them. There are 10,000 kinds of birds around the world. There's 700 species that breed right here in the United States and Canada. There's 300 that could be found in Rhode Island if you were a crazy birder like me and spent a couple days every week searching them out. But there are definitely plenty of folks in Rhode Island that look and see 300 species of birds every single year right in our general area. And so they're easy to access, and there's so many cool things to note about them, all the wonderful colors and their interesting behaviors. And again, they're right there close by to be able to spend some time paying attention to them. What I thought I'd do today is to introduce you to some of those species, share some stories. I've got lots of fun stories about some of these birds, and hopefully give you a sense of the creatures that are literally out your backyard. I suspect we'll talk about 40 species or so today, and I bet you could see all of them if you did a walk around your neighborhood once a week for a year. You would probably see all these species and many more if you just took a little time and paid attention. So let me get started and launch my slides, if I remember how to do that.
There you go. And if I can just interject just for a second. So if you're joining us, welcome. If you'd like to have a nicer experience watching a full screen of the slides, go up to the upper right-hand corner, look at gallery view, and click on the full screen view, and then just click on gallery view. So full screen and then gallery view, and you should see Todd on the right and the slides on the left. Thank you, Todd.
All right. So let's get started and introduce you to some of the fun and interesting and cool birds that we have in our area. And we're going to start with my opening slide here, which is of a barred owl. There are 3 kinds of somewhat common owls that are resident in Rhode Island and southern New England year round. And this is the easiest one to find. The great horned owl is a little bit larger, a little bit more difficult to track down. The eastern screech owl, a little tiny guy about 6 inches in size, is one that's probably the hardest of the so-called common owls in our area. But for me, open your window in right about this time of year in the middle of the night, and you have a really great chance of hearing a barred owl. This is the owl that bird watchers describe its call as saying, "Who cooks for you, cooks for you all." And I don't want to embarrass myself, but I'm going to anyway. This is the only bird that I'm actually able to imitate its sound. And so in part because I hear it so often in my own backyard, it wakes me up in the middle of the night and even in the daytime. So listen for this as you open your window in the middle of the night. It's supposed to sound like it's saying, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" And so again, a common bird in woodland, particularly wet woodlands, but lots of other habitats around our area. An easy owl to identify based on that call. It's a good sized bird. It might be 18 inches tall while it's sitting there in the tree. It's probably got a wingspan of about 4 feet or so. Good sized bird, and an absolutely wonderful one to take a look at when you get that opportunity. Those very dark eyes are quite distinctive among the owls in our area. It's a great deal about how they live, where they live. As we go along here, and I will point out some of those into your bird feeder, are these guys, right? Think about beaks and feet, like the top two in this slide. The branch that tells you that there climbs up and down the side of a tree like a woodpecker does, and that's going back. Again, tells you it has a lifestyle than the other birds. Little tiny beaks on the top two, those are great for grasping insects. Those are great for probing, and especially for picking open seeds. You'll see them come to your bird feeders and case of the seed to get at the seed on the inside. But then we look at the nuthatch on the bottom left. It's got a very different beak, that long sword-like beak that it uses to probe deeply into the crevices of tree bark, looking for insects. Again, that beak and those feet tell us a great deal about how different the nuthatch is from these other species. Here we got three very common birds. I would be surprised if you all don't know, to some degree, all three of these birds: the blue jay, the cardinal, the robin. But once again, notice beaks and feet. These guys are all perching birds that perch on branches. They have 3 toes forward, 1 toe back. But notice the differences in their beak. That giant cardinal beak is monstrous compared to most other birds' beaks. That tells us immediately that this is what I describe as a seed crunching bird. That beak is used for just crunching down on the seeds and breaking them open to get access to the good stuff inside, as opposed to the chickadee and the titmouse in the previous slide, which peck open the seed. This guy just crunches down like your Christmas nutcracker does, crunches down and opens up those seeds. The robin on the right has a different beak. That's good for probing in the soil, looking for worms, as we know that they do, and for grabbing and eating berries. And then the blue jay beak on the top left. Look at that big, stout, monstrous thing. That's sort of the all-purpose tool of the bird beak world. It's great for opening seeds. It's great for tearing apart flesh. It's great for grabbing baby birds and dragging them away, as they will often do. It's great for doing just about anything that a beak needs to do to eat whatever it chooses to eat. Again, common birds these are, and birds that I'm sure that you're quite familiar with. Let's talk about finches, because these are also about birds that are very likely to show up at your bird feeders quite commonly, quite regularly. If I just turn my head here and look out my kitchen slider window, I can see my bird feeders, and I've got goldfinches that are out there right now. Finches are quite common birds around here. Again, notice their beaks. They're big beaks by comparison to some birds, which again tells us that they are seed-eating birds. But notice especially the colors. Here we have a house finch on the left. The male is the bright red one. The female is a bit more drab. The goldfinch is particularly notable. The male is the bright yellow one. The female is more drab in colors. And that's an important element to pay attention to and to think about. Why are the males brightly colored and the females less so? Well, it's for 2 reasons, actually. One is, as is the case in most relationships that I know, the females are in charge. It's the females that are picking the mate. And so the males need to show off their colors as best as they can in order to be selected to mate with a female bird. And so that's one reason why the males of most birds tend to be more colorful than the females. The other reason is that the females are the ones who are typically sitting on the nest, caring for their young. They want to be more camouflaged. They don't want to be showy and don't want to be noticed. And so that's helping them to protect their nest, to protect their young ones from predators that might be coming along. Again, that's the explanation for the varying colors of males versus females. And again, 2 very common birds that you're very likely to see in your area, in your neighborhood, in your backyard, and almost any place else around here. So let's talk woodpeckers, because woodpeckers have an amazing, important role in the ecosystem, not just for their own lives, but for so many other birds. As you know, woodpeckers drill a hole in a tree. That's where their nest is, or they will drill into the tree bark trying to find where they might find food, bugs of some sort. And they have, in order to do that, they have this this ability, this sort of, it's almost like they're wearing a football helmet. They have a shock absorber in their head that allows them to drill into that tree without getting them a headache or a concussion. Other birds that tried to do that would probably be injured and wouldn't be able to succeed. And so they're able to get into that and into those trees and dig a hole and excavate and nest in that tree. But there are many, many other birds that also nest in a hole in a tree, but are unable to make a hole in a tree like a woodpecker can. And so that's the role of the woodpecker. The woodpecker drills a hole. They might use it for 1 year. They move on someplace else. They abandon that hole. And now we have lots of holes available all around the forests for other birds to move in. So bluebirds and tree swallows and chickadees and nuthatches and great crested flycatchers and lots of other birds in our area will only nest in a hole in a tree. They can't make a hole in a tree, so they depend on a woodpecker to abandon a hole that they have made so that these other birds can move in. And you may not realize that when you put a birdhouse up in your yard, a birdhouse is essentially an artificial hole in a tree. And so the only birds that are going to go into a birdhouse to nest are going to be those that nest in holes in trees. You're not going to get a robin in a birdhouse because they don't nest in a hole in a tree. They nest in a cup nest on a tree, for instance. These three birds in this picture here, quite common, again, easy to attract to your backyard. The downy woodpecker on the top left with the male that has the red spot on the back of the head. The red-bellied woodpecker on the bottom left, the absolute worst named bird there is. If you hold this bird in your hand and look at his belly, you would be hard-pressed to find red on his belly. I would prefer to call this bird the zebra-backed woodpecker. There's already a bird called the red-headed woodpecker, so we can't use that one. Almost any other name would be better than the red-bellied woodpecker, but nonetheless, that's what it is. And then, and in fact, that's actually a southern species that wasn't around here in southern New England maybe 20 or 30 years ago, at least not in very big numbers, but they have expanded their range northward, and now they're quite common and easy to find. And on the right, we have the northern flicker, a beautiful woodpecker. When it opens its wings, in fact, you can see the underside of its tail. When it opens its wings, especially as well, you see that bright yellow color. It used to be called the yellow-shafted flicker because of that yellow coloration. This is actually an anteater, largely. So it will be on the ground next to the robins who are looking around for worms in your lawn. You might have a flicker coming down and looking for ants in your lawn and then flying up to a hole in the tree to feed. All right, now let's move on and talk about what I refer to as the invaders. Those guys that that aren't particularly popular, that we don't necessarily want around. They certainly don't belong here. These are all non-native species that could be considered invasive and undesirable. They're the birds that are often thought of as the city birds. We have the pigeon on the top right, the house sparrow on the top left, the European starling. All attractive birds if you pay attention and think about them without realizing how they're somewhat thought of as the rats with wings or the dirty city birds. They're still quite attractive birds, but they don't belong here. These are all European species that were introduced either intentionally or unintentionally and have taken off and taken over in large amount. They're quite common almost around the whole world now because they've been introduced in so many places and because they have been adaptable and are able to adapt to human environments, including big cities. And the one I'll point out in particular is the one on the bottom left, the European starling. This is a bird that is that came here because there was a guy. There was always a guy. There was a guy from Europe, from Britain, I believe, who was obsessed with Shakespeare. And in the late 1800s, he came to New York City and decided he wanted to introduce every bird mentioned by Shakespeare in any of his sonnets or plays, wanted to introduce all the birds mentioned by Shakespeare into New York City. And so he brought many, many varieties of birds to New York and released them in the late 1800s. Most of them didn't survive because, of course, they didn't have the right food or the right habitat or whatever. The starling, however, survived. and has thrived and is now everywhere. And we see them in every city, in every town, and everywhere, whether regardless of where you might live and what kind of habitat you have. Starlings are going to show up at one point or another in small or large numbers. An interesting story. Still, it's unfortunate that these guys have taken over and are sort of outcompeting our native species. But at this stage, there's not much we can do to eradicate them. I should point out that all birds in North America are protected, at least in the United States, protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, except for these three. And not that I'm advocating this, but it is not illegal for you to harass or harm or destroy nests of these three birds because they are invasive species that don't belong here. Okay, I assume that some of you, most of you, have a pond somewhere nearby your neighborhood that you might stroll over to on occasion. These are the three birds that are most common, most likely to be found in ponds here in southern New England. Large ponds, small ponds, big lakes, even coastal areas. You're certainly going to come across the mallard duck on the top left with the male that has the bright green head, the Canada goose on the top right, which can be abundant in the wintertime and is a bit of a nuisance on occasion because they love lawns and big wide open golf courses and parklands and so forth. And then we have the mute swan on the bottom left, absolutely beautiful bird, which happens to be another of the invaders. That's another bird that does not belong in North America, but it is indeed quite common in a lot of pond areas. It's a bird that's big, could be 30 or 40 pounds, aggressive, especially when it's defending its mate, defending its eggs, and it eats a lot, pulls up vegetation in our ponds and sort of keeps away the native ducks in our area. So that's a bit of concern. But you know, the swan certainly has plenty of defenders out there, including, interestingly, the Queen of England. I should point out that once again another strange British story. According to British law, all mute swans are property of the Queen, and so you know, if you got a swan in your neighborhood and you know all of a sudden the Queen shows up, you now know why. She's trying to bring back her swans back to Britain. Not likely to really happen, but nonetheless, these are the three most common of the waterfowl that we're likely to have in backyard ponds and lakes in our area. Again, think about beaks and feet. These beaks and feet are very different than all the other beaks and feet we've been talking about. The feet of these birds are large, are webbed to allow them to swim through the water. The beaks are long, spatula-like things that they use perfectly to filter out tiny organisms in the water and to grasp the vegetation and pull it out to feed on that as well. Excuse me. Now, all the birds we've talked about so far are what birders refer to as permanent residents. They are here year-round, and you can find them on almost any day around the region throughout the year. The rest of the birds, with the exception of the song sparrow on the top left here, the rest of these birds are migrants, are birds that are transient into and through our areas, and so you're not going to see them year-round. And let's talk about these three. These are sparrows, and oftentimes some people who are just getting into bird watching, they ignore the sparrows because they're often so difficult to identify. Most of them are brown and streaky and very hard to distinguish between one or another. These three are relatively easy to distinguish. The song sparrow on the top left, again, a year-round resident. That dark spot in the middle of its chest is very distinctive. Any place where there's some small shrubby areas, some thickets, you're going to find a song sparrow. It's a song you'll readily identify after you pay attention to it for a bit. The bottom two are species that are winter visitors to southern New England exclusively. They don't breed in our area. The junco on the bottom left, the gray and bird with the white belly and the sort of pinkish beak, very distinctive. There's no other bird in the eastern United States that looks like that, an easy sparrow to identify. I would typically have 10 or 20 or 30 of them in my backyard, scavenging the seeds underneath my feeders during a typical winter. And the white-throated sparrow on the right, again, a bird that almost exclusively here in the wintertime. That black and white striped head with the yellow patch between the eyes is very distinctive. The white throat patch is very distinctive. Again, there are probably a dozen or more kinds of sparrows that visit and spend time in southern New England at some point in time during the course of a typical year. But these are probably among the more common ones that you're going to see at different seasons of the year. All right, so here we are, we're in spring, spring migration is underway. And for me, these three birds are really the first signs of spring. We often think about, or we used to think about anyway, as the robin as being the first sign of spring. When it arrives, that's a sign of spring. And yet, as temperatures have warmed in the wintertime, we're now getting more and more robins that spend the entire year here through the winter months, feeding on berries. If anybody has berry trees or berry bushes that ripen in the wintertime, you will often have robins coming around and feeding on them. So those are more year-round residents now. These three birds are really, for me, the real sign of spring. We have the common grackle on the left. This is the group that we generally refer to as the blackbirds. The common grackle on the left with a slightly longer tail in proportion to his body compared to most of the rest of the birds, and with that very wonderful iridescent bluish purplish head and feathers on its wings, that bright yellow eye, very distinctive bird. The red-winged blackbird in the middle with the very distinctive bright red shoulder patch. If you have a pond or wetland area that has cattails in it, you will absolutely find and see red-winged blackbirds during the breeding season there. And then we have the brown-headed cowbird in the right, again distinctive with that black feathers and the yellow and the brown head. These three will often travel in large groups, and it may be flocks of hundreds or 1,000 perhaps at times as they're migrating up into our area. They will be traveling together in big groups, so you'll see all of them together in one big flock very often. The cowbird, I should point out, is perhaps the least favorite of all of our native birds here in our region. And that's because it has a very unique breeding strategy. This is a bird that we refer to as a brood parasite. A brood parasite. That means that this is a bird that does not take care of its young. It doesn't raise its young. The female will find the nest of another bird and lay its egg in that other nest and then skedaddle and get out of there and allow the owner of that nest to raise to incubate that egg and raise that baby until it is ready to fly off and take care of itself. Not a behavior that we as humans typically think of as heroic, letting somebody else take care of our children, but that's the strategy that this guy has developed. And so sadly, what often happens is that the cowbird will lay its egg in the nest of a smaller bird, such that when the egg hatches and when the owner of that nest's eggs hatch, the cowbird chick will always be the largest one and will always get the most food, and will sometimes kick out the baby birds of the owners of the nest owner's species, and you end up with a mama bird feeding a baby cowbird that ends up being larger than itself, and not raising any of its own. So it's a breeding strategy that works for the cowbird. It doesn't make it an endearing species. It is a native species, and I guess we got to love them all as we do the rest of them, I suppose. Nonetheless, common birds, particularly in the springtime when they're flocking in big numbers right about now. So here we are. We're in late April now. Probably in 2 weeks, maybe May 6 to 12 or so, that will be the peak of spring migration. That will be the time when literally billions of birds will be flying from the southern US, from South America, from Central America, flying up here to our region to nest. These are birds that are mostly insect eaters that go south because we don't have insects around, at least not enough during the winter months for them to feed on. And so they all fly south in the fall to spend the winter in warm areas where there's lots of bugs, and they all come back north again right about now to begin to breed. And so we're going to talk about some of those birds that are just beginning to arrive now. The first couple of barn swallows have been reported here in Rhode Island in the last week or so. And that's a bird you'll see nesting in barns, literally, and swooping around in fields and farmlands and so forth, catching insects on the wing in the air. Very distinctive with that long forked tail, with the rusty throat patch, an easy bird to identify. The top right, we have the gray catbird. Again, an easy one to identify, all gray with a blackish cap and a little bit of a rusty patch under the tail. That's very difficult to see. This is a bird, of course. It's called the gray catbird because it sounds like a cat. If you're walking around in a shrubby area in your neighborhood and you hear a cat meowing in the bushes, in May and June, that noise probably is not a cat. It is probably a catbird. Easy bird to find around our area. Very distinctive little meowing sound like a cat. Keep your eyes open for that in any shrubby, thickety area that you might be coming across. They'll be in your backyard, in your flower bed, and elsewhere. Again, an easy one to find. And then we have on the bottom right the rose-breasted grosbeak. Beautiful bird, again, very distinctive and easy to identify. White belly, rosy chest patch, black head and back. And notice that beak again. That's got a big, giant beak. That tells us that this is unusual among the migrating birds, because this isn't an insect eater. This is a seed eater. It has that big, giant seed crunching beak, which means that it will come to your bird feeders. If you've got some sunflower seed out in your feeders in May and June, you have an excellent chance of seeing rose-breasted grosbeak coming to your feeders because they're seed eaters and looking for a nice handout. Most of the rest of the migrants are insect eaters, so they're not going to come to your feeders unless you're somehow providing them with plenty of insects. All right, here's the challenge. The next group of birds I want to talk about are the warblers. Now, there are about 35 kinds of warblers that in fact, I think entirely all of them are migrants. They all migrate from Central America, South America, a few from Southern US. They all migrate up to our area during the springtime, and they'll be coming in really big numbers in the first 3 weeks of May. They are all, for the most part, a challenge to identify. Most of them have yellow patches in some part of their body. They're mottled. They're difficult to distinguish between, and most of them spend their time high up in the trees. So makes them very difficult. It's also challenging because about half of those 35 species of warblers are just migrating through. So your only chance to see them is the first 3 weeks of May, because then they're just continuing on further north to breed in the boreal forests of southern Canada, maybe northern New England and elsewhere. So there's probably 15 or so that spend the breeding season here, May, June, July, August. They'll still be around. And while most of them are indeed challenging to identify, these 4 here are probably the most common, the easiest ones for you to identify in your neighborhood here in southern New England. And we'll start with the one on the top right, the common yellowthroat, very distinctive. Again, in a shrubby area, a wetland area, you're absolutely going to find a common yellowthroat, a very distinctive black mask, yellow throat, and a very distinctive call. When it's singing its song, it sounds like it's saying, witchity, 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 witch. Very distinctive, very easy call to learn if you're walking along a power line corridor, if you're walking around a pond, if you're walking near a wetland, you will absolutely begin hearing common yellowthroat singing in a couple more weeks. They will be common and abundant almost anywhere you go where the habitat is a little bit wet. That's where you'll find the common yellowthroat. The yellow warbler on the bottom right, also very distinctive. While most of the warblers have yellow patches on them somewhere, this is the only one, or one of the only ones, that is entirely yellow, although this guy also has the male anyway, has a bit of bright, of a kind of reddish or rusty colored streaking on his chest. And again, You find an area that's a little bit shrubby, that has some small trees, some crabapple trees, some small saplings. It's an area where you're absolutely going to find yellow warblers. The bird watchers say that this is an easy song to identify as well. It supposedly sounds like the bird is saying, "Sweet, sweet, oh so sweet." When I told that to my wife, she didn't hear "sweet, sweet, oh so sweet." So I'm not sure how easy that is to pick up. But again, very distinctive, easy bird to find and see because it seems to be a little less skittish than some of the others. We'll be flying back and forth from shrubs to small trees and so forth, almost anywhere you go in a couple more weeks. The top left bird, the black and white warbler, is one of those with 2 toes going forward and 2 toes going back, because it not only perches on branches, but it, like the woodpeckers, like the nuthatch in one of my first slides, this one will also go up and down the sides of tree trunks, including going head first down, and it will go around and underneath branches. So very distinctive behavior. Its coloration is absolutely distinctive. Nothing else is black and white striped like this guy is. But it's primarily a forest bird. You'll see him at the edge of the forest, in the deep forest, but it's not going to be in a little shrubby area like those other 2 warblers we talked about. If your property borders a forest, you have a great chance of seeing and hearing one. But if there's no forest nearby, you need to go find a forest in order to see the black and white warbler. And the same is true of the ovenbird. But this is the loudest mouth of all the warblers, maybe the loudest mouth of all the birds that we have breeding in our area. The ovenbird is named the ovenbird because it builds a nest on the ground that's sideways. So instead of a cup nest like so many other birds that they sit on, this is a sideways cup. This is an oven-shaped nest that the birds walk into to lay their eggs in. And so that's what the bird gets its name from. But the bird watchers refer to this as the teacher bird. If you're a teacher, this is your namesake bird. This is the teacher bird because its voice sounds like it's saying teacher. It goes, teacher, 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 teach, very loudly. It's a bird that's primarily on the ground or very low in the forest, very difficult to see, but not at all difficult to hear. If you are walking next to a forest, anywhere close to a forest, certainly walking through a forest in the next 3 or 4 weeks, you will absolutely hear an ovenbird singing. They're common, they are loud, they are unmistakable. All right. Now, those are sort of the introduction I want to provide to you of the variety of birds that are common, that you have a great chance of seeing in your neighborhood. I want to then focus on a few other birds that are particularly notable, particularly entertaining, particularly beautiful, and that have some fun stories to share. And this one in particular is a great one to start with, the ruby-throated hummingbird. What an amazing bird. Look at the color of that throat, the wonderful greenish on its back, the long beak that it uses to probe inside flowers for nectar. This is a bird that flaps its wings up to 80 times a second in order to hover in front of you, in order to go frontwards and backwards and sideways and upside down. It's got a wonderful little buzzy twittering sound that it makes. It's just an amazing bird. And I hope that anyone who makes an effort to plant some flowers for these guys that would put a nectar feeding bird feeder out has a great chance of seeing and enjoying hummingbirds. We only have one species of hummingbird here in the eastern part of the United States. And so that makes it very easy to identify. Any hummingbird you're going to see here in Rhode Island is going to be a ruby-throated hummingbird. But if you were to go to the west, particularly the southwest in Arizona, you've got maybe 12 kinds of hummingbirds, most of which look very much like each other. And so they're very difficult to distinguish. But my goodness, this is such an amazing, beautiful bird. I hope you will all take a few moments and spend some time looking at gardens and looking and putting up a feeder, perhaps trying to attract hummingbirds. They can't be beat. Nor can this guy. This is a scarlet tanager. And oftentimes when I hear people who are just beginning to pay attention to the birds and they get excited when they see a cardinal and they're so thrilled by the wonderful coloration of that red northern cardinal, and they come up to me and tell me they're so excited about it. And I say, yes, and yes, indeed, that is a beautiful bird. And in the back of my head, I don't want to discourage them, but in the back of my head, I always say, but gosh, you ain't seen nothing yet until you've seen the scarlet tanager. Look at that coloration, that beautiful, bright, iridescent red color, the contrasting black feathers on this wings and tail. This is just an amazing bird. The scarlet tanager, it's a forest dwelling bird. Its song sounds a little bit like a robin with a sore throat, as we bird watchers say. It's a bird that is an insect eater, so won't be easy to attract to your yard unless you have a bird bath. I live right surrounded by forest, and I hear scarlet tanagers every year in my backyard. Very seldom do I see them unless they are coming to my bird bath. They will definitely come and take a bath and take a drink from my bird bath. So if you live near a forest, you have a great chance of hearing a scarlet tanager. They're hard to see because they stick to the deep forest, but get a bird bath, and hopefully one of these beautiful birds will come out and join you. All right, here's my favorite story. This is the cedar waxwing. This is the bird that made me a bird watcher. I was in college in my dormitory on the second floor, studying, looking out the window, and right outside my window was a crabapple tree, sort of like the picture here that we have here. And this is a bird that is a berry eater. And so it will come to crabapple trees and come to other kinds of berry trees. But my goodness, look at the colors of that. Look at the patterns. Look at the feathers of this bird, that amazing crest, the black mask, the feathers that look like they've just been painted on. It is an amazing bird. In fact, at the very bottom of the picture, you can see the little red tips to the wing feathers. A stunning bird as far as I'm concerned. And these are nomads. They will travel in large flocks all together looking for berries, looking for trees and shrubs with berries. And they will come and they will engorge themselves on all the berries. It might take them a couple days to eat them all. And then they will all fly off to the next place and find the next area where there are berries. In my yard, I've got a couple of crabapple trees, a couple of viburnum bushes in my backyard, all of which produce berries, all of which have attract cedar waxwings in large numbers for a couple of days during the wintertime. And they're just gorgeous to watch. But the funniest thing about cedar waxwings, they're berry eaters. What happens when berries have been on the bush for too long? They get fermented. What happens when you eat fermented berries? Yes, you get drunk. If you've never seen a drunk bird before, you are in for a treat. I've only seen it once, but it was a flock of cedar waxwings that had eaten some fermented berries somewhere, and they were flopping up and down on top of each other. They couldn't fly straight. They were bumping into each other. They were rolling on their backs. It was hilarious. So if you get a chance, pay attention, just in part just because this is a gorgeous bird, but also pay attention to if you can find some drunken cedar waxwings. It is an absolute hoot. All right. Another notable bird to pay attention to, the Baltimore Oriole. Any of you baseball fans out there are familiar with this, with the name of this bird anyway, the Baltimore Oriole, because of the baseball team. This is what the bird really looks like. Beautiful orange belly, black and white wings, a black head and back, a stunning looking bird. This is actually a member of the blackbird family, like the grackle and the redwing and the cowbird. But quite different because they're famous as weavers. These are birds that can weave an amazing nest. It's a nest that hangs maybe a foot or more below a branch, and it's really a great defense mechanism against predators. So imagine there's a branch that's hanging over a road or hanging over a pond or lake, and from that branch is woven a long hanging nest beneath the branch, a foot or more beneath the branch, woven out of grasses, and very difficult for predators to access, particularly because these nests are often over roads and over water bodies. So that if you were a snake or a raccoon or other predator that likes to eat baby birds or likes to eat birds' eggs, you will think twice if you have to reach down a foot below the branch in order to get access to the eggs in that nest, because you might fall and land in the pond or land in the street below. So it's a great strategy that these birds are employing simply to protect their nest, to protect their young ones. And it seems to work. These nests are well constructed, well and sturdy nests that you will actually see a year later. When the leaves are gone, you will actually see the remnants of these nests hanging down from the branches for many months after the breeding season is over. And yet, besides these wonderful characteristics of their nest building abilities, for me, it's still the amazing thing about these birds is the stunning color, this wonderful bright orange and black bird that again, common and probably in almost everybody's neighborhood. All right, another bizarre story for you here. What color is this bird? Yeah, I can't hear any of you, but that's okay. This is of course a blue colored bird, but it's not. There are, and I always have to double check myself when I say this, there are no blue feathers in nature. You can look it up. When I first heard this from my ornithology professor, I didn't believe him. And I went back and looked up as many references I could find, and every reference said the same thing. There are yellow feathers and white feathers and purple feathers and green feathers and black feathers. There are no blue feathers in nature, despite the fact that we're looking at a blue bird. Apparently, the blue coloration really is all about the unusual architecture, the structure of those feathers, combined with the light refracting off of those feathers that make it look to us like it's blue. But if you were to take one of those feathers and crumple it up and put it under the light or take it away from the light, it will just look like a drab gray feather. There are no blue feathers in nature. I keep having to look that up to confirm it. And once again, it's still true, as it always has been true, despite how difficult it is to believe. Nonetheless, this is a stunning bird. This is the indigo bunting. This is the bird that, again, is in shrubby areas. The easiest place to find them is down those power line corridors that many of us have through our communities, areas that are devoted to shrubs and not to trees. And so this is a great bird to find in that habitat. Again, they should be arriving in the next 2 weeks or so. Although I've heard 2 reports of them already already arriving here in Rhode Island, and you can find them most easily by listening for their call. This is a bird whose song sounds like the rubber ducky in your bathtub. Squeaky, 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 squeak. If you're out there in the shrubland somewhere and you hear squeaky, 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 squeak, that's going to be an indigo bunting. It will not be a rubber ducky. It will likely be an indigo bunting, a stunning looking bird. Again, notice that beak. It's got the big size beak. It's primarily a seed eater and an absolutely gorgeous one at that. A couple last birds I want to wrap up the program with, and they're both water birds, sort of. And we start with this guy. This is the great blue heron. This is a very tall bird, a 4-foot tall bird with that massive sword-like beak and the long plume out the back of its head during the breeding season. A beautiful bird that will stand at the edge of the pond and wait without moving for long minutes at a time, waiting for a fish or a frog or a snake or a crayfish or something else to come nearby, and it will then stab it with that beak, toss its head back, and swallow the whole thing whole. It will even grab and swallow fish that look like they're way too big for that long, skinny neck to get down, but that throat is kind of pleated. It allows it to open up larger than you can imagine. Beautiful, stunning, amazing, majestic, large bird. When they're flying, they look like a giant dinosaur, like one of those pterodactyls. Their long feet sticking out behind them, a very slow wing beat from their wings, carrying them across the sky. Easy to identify, the slowest flapping bird that we have around, long legs sticking out behind it when it's flying. Quite a distinctive, quite an amazing bird. They definitely breed here in Burrville and in surrounding areas where there's ponds with lots of dead trees around them, because they will nest in the top of dead trees with their giant stick nests. And the last bird I want to point to is one I suspect that many people haven't heard of, haven't seen, but they are definitely common and around here. And this is my newest favorite bird. I have a new favorite bird all the time, but this is perhaps my most favorite bird of them all. the hooded merganser. Look at those stunning colors, that bright yellow eye, the black and white stripes, the amazingly long, skinny beak. That's a serrated beak. And so this is a fish-eating duck. It's a duck that dives under the water and will swim underwater to catch fish. It's serrated to be able to hold on to the fish and not let them slip out of her beak. They get to the surface and they swallow those fish whole. But notice the unusual shape of its head. It's all an illusion. They actually have a normal shaped head. What you're looking at is a big crest, sort of like a blue jay has a crest or a cardinal has a crest. This is the crest of the hooded merganser, and it can raise and lower that crest when it wants to. When it lowers the crest, it looks like it has a normal head shape with a long white stripe behind the eye. And then it opens the crest up, and this whole big giant white patch emerges. Again, it's a showpiece to show off to the ladies to attract a mate, and it's just another gorgeous bird we have here. This is a bird that nests in a hole in a tree, and again, right near a pond. And so oftentimes you'll see large birdhouses on a post at the edge of a pond. That's a birdhouse to attract a wood duck. Or a hooded merganser, both of which will nest in a hole in a tree, and their babies will jump out into the pond as soon as, a day after they hatch, and they will hang around with mom. And I know that we have them here all winter in large numbers, and in the small ponds, small woodland ponds, we definitely have them breeding in our area as well. I think I'll wrap up with that as my last slide and just remind you that, my goodness, we've got some amazing birds around here, lots of them that are worth exploring, worth looking for. Most of them are easy to find if you just take a few extra moments and search for them, and hope that you'll enjoy and appreciate the thrill of looking for the backyard birds of Southern New England. Paul, thank you very much. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Todd. I'll be the audience of let's see, 26.
All right, very good. Yeah,
Thank
and again, I'm happy to take some questions if you have any. I'm not sure how we handle transmitting those questions my way.
Sure. Maybe the best way to do it is to, if you can stop sharing your screen.
Oh, yep.
For a second.
Bear with me. How do I do that again?
You're almost there.
There we go.
There you go. And what I'll do is, if anybody wants to ask a question, if you can unmute your video or your audio, you have the ability to do that. And then simply ask the question.
Hello, Paul.
Yes. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, from the Smithfield Land Trust. I applaud the quality of the photography that I saw. If anyone cares to visit the Leo Bouchard fishing dock off Route 5 near 116, we have posted all of the wildlife that we can identify to date at Wolf Hill. And that includes, of course, a poster of our native birds. So anyone wishing to see what the birds are feeding on at Wolf Hill, to look at the interlocking plant and ecosystems, we have it all displayed at the kiosk down there for you.
That's great. That's great.
I also wanted to ask a question.
Thanks, Cindy. And I can't take credit for all those photographs. They're great pictures, but most of them aren't mine. They're borrowed from friends and others. But nonetheless, they certainly get the message across about how beautiful the birds we have around here.
Cindy, did you have a question?
The question is, where you see an abundance of fowls, such as Canadian geese, I once heard an idea to open a hunt to modify the numbers since they don't have predators. And I wonder how safe it is as a food source to offer to nonprofits and food banks alike, just to put some balance back into the environment. How does that sound?
Well, certainly Canada geese are indeed a nuisance in a lot of places. This used to be an exclusively migratory species that would come here in the wintertime and then fly north to breed. But many of them have realized that, big giant lawns like at golf courses and other places and parks are the ideal place for them. Grass and pond is what they're looking for. And so we've sort of, without intending to do so, created ideal habitat for these birds. And so many of them have decided not to migrate and have become a nuisance, because you certainly don't want to be walking around near a big flock of geese, among other reasons. And so certainly my understanding is that there has been an expanded hunting season targeting the non-migratory flock of Canada geese here in Rhode Island. I'm not sure the dates and when that happens, but certainly there, plenty of people shoot Canada geese during the hunting season, and they're edible. They're apparently good tasting. I haven't had it myself, but certainly that is one strategy that DEM is employing to try to address this concern of just these nuisance of so many of these geese that don't really belong here.
Doris, you have a question?
I got a couple questions. The first is, where do the blackbirds build their nests? On the ground around the reeds where they're, or do they don't build them in trees, I presume? No,
correct. So the red-winged blackbirds that are primarily cattail lovers will build their nest within the cattail marsh, within the cattail. So they'll get pieces of last year's cattail that are dried up, and they will weave or create a nest right in the midst of the cattails. And so often hard to see. The females aren't nearly as distinctive as the males are, so they are well hidden in those marsh cattails. But yes, so maybe a foot up from the base of the cattail plant itself, particularly when there's a thick grouping of cattail plants there, that's where they will be building their nest.
And the other one is about the Baltimore oriole. I have them flying through here, but I've never seen any nests like you described. What sort of trees would they use?
They're in a real variety of trees. They should be in oak trees. They should be in maple trees. It's going to be habitat again. They're kind of an edge bird, so the edge of a forest, or a big tree that might be near a pond. It isn't really a specific tree species that they're looking for. It's looking for sort of the edge of a forested patch of land where they're most likely going to be found. And it's interesting you say that you see them flying through. Oftentimes people will talk about putting out oranges as a feeder to feed orioles, and it really works, but just for a short period of time. These birds arrive in at the first week or so of May, and I can put out a dozen oranges. They'll eat an orange every single day. I'll have 3 or 4 orioles around my yard every single day for 3 weeks, and then they disappear, and I don't know where they go. And everybody I talk to that does the same thing has the same story. For some reason, they're easy to attract during this early migration period. They'll eat oranges in your yard, and then they go off and build their nest someplace that isn't in my backyard, that's someplace else. So where they go and how they make that decision is a little bit challenging to identify particularly. But if you want to get a close-up look, plan on putting out some oranges in your yard about the middle of May, and you have a good chance of getting some close-up looks.
Well, I will try that. I do see them, and I'm on a pond, but I've never seen. It's probably too urban.
Perhaps.
For them to build nests there. But at least I've got the trees anyway. All right, thank you.
Good. You're welcome.
And anyone else have any questions? Again, if you have a question, just unmute your microphone and ask away. I've got a question. How are we doing with bird populations, particularly in this area? We can talk about, you mentioned earlier about billions of birds migrating from the southern region to up north, but how are we doing?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's not a good answer. It's a challenging one to really get specific data about our region here in southern New England, particularly, but nationally, continent-wide, populations are way down of most species. And so, when I started birding 35 years ago, during migration, I remember seeing, one tree that would have 30 or 40 birds in it of, a dozen different species. And now we still have the same species. We haven't lost any species, but the numbers of individuals is way down. And there was a report a couple of months ago that said we've probably lost a third of the total number of birds that live in North America. And so it's a sad storyline, and there's lots of factors from most of which relate to habitat destruction, development, and that kind of thing. And that's, obviously one of the important reasons for having a land trust and trying to protect land is to provide habitat for these guys. That really is the big driving factor. But so many other things, from pesticides to various impacts from climate change to just a whole host of other issues that is affecting these species. So overall, it's a negative storyline. Numbers are down, but there are some good news factors in there. Some birds, particularly those that can adapt to living in or near human habitation, are doing well. Or at least are doing better than many of the others. Cardinals and blue jays and robins and those species that we know that are common in our neighborhoods. Those species have figured out how to adapt to living in our area, to living within near people, and so they seem to be doing better than those birds that have a much narrower definition of what their preferred habitat is. Because when that little bit of habitat is gone, then so are the birds.
We have just about a minute left. Todd, is there a guide? You've been doing this for 30 years. If we see something unusual, is there a place either online or in book form that we can look up a bird, look at its coloration, maybe figure out how to identify it, that you would recommend?
Sure. There's lots and lots of bird field guides out there. Probably the one that is most famous these days is by a man named Sibley. The Sibley Guide to Birds is the best known and probably the best of all the field guides for identifying birds in our area. You might also, I know there are a number of apps that have come out from Cornell University, which has a big research, bird research area, and Audubon Society that have created a couple of apps, one called Merlin, which is a great app that really helps you in the field identify a bird. It helps you, it asks you questions so you can narrow down the identification to just a couple of birds to help you to figure out what it is that you're looking for. Looks, Paul, like you've got that one right there. So yes, indeed, that's the one to look for if you're looking for an app form. And the field guide, I use a National Geographic field guide. I use the Sibley field guide. There's a couple others, but for those of you just looking into getting your first field guide in book form, which you can, from my perspective as an old guy, it's much easier to flip through a book and then an app. But try the Sibley guide as the first one to take a look at.
Todd, thank you so much on behalf of the Burrillville Land Trust and all the folks who are here.
You're quite welcome.
26 of us. That was superb. That was really great.
Great.
And certainly on a cloudy day, this was great. I don't know if you can see people are figuring out how to do a reaction here, and they're giving you a thumbs up and applause. So
good.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Please check this out. We've got a whole bunch of other events and presentations coming up all during the month of April. Check us out on Facebook and on the Burrillville Land Trust website. Todd, thanks again, everybody. So long. Have a great day. Stay healthy and wash your hands.
Bye now.
That was great, Todd. Thank you.
You're welcome, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you.